I could call this place home. Chapter 1 Mother's Day Breakfast. Tom had snuck out of bed as quietly as he could that morning, making sure that Maddie was still fast asleep. He eased the bedroom door shut and made his way to the kitchen, where he found his boys waiting just like he had told them to the night before at the kitchen island. It was Mother's Day, the first since the three boys had come into their lives, and Tom knew it had to be perfect.
Okay, she's still asleep, so let's act fast.
Tom said to the attentive children.
Tails, I bought some flowers that can arrange in the cute vase Maddie likes, and you know the tray in the corner cabinet. It needs to be set for breakfast in bed.
Okay.
Tails said eagerly, hopping down from his stool and getting out his supplies.
Great.
Tom turned to the blue hedgehog.
Sonic, can you feed Ozzy and make sure he gets outside without waking up Maddie?
No problemo.
Sonic got up from his stool too.
And just be quiet, okay? Footsteps can get pretty loud when you get going.
The hedgehog nodded, and quietly slid on his socks out of the room instead of his usual blue blur. Knuckles looked up at Tom expectantly.
What can I do to help on Maddie's sacred day, Donald or Tom?
Tom chuckled at his naming convention.
I'm going to cook her favorite breakfast, a pesto omelet, and I need you to squeeze some fresh orange juice, okay?
Knuckles nodded, his usual determined look on his face. Tom smiled, holding out his fist for a power bump.
Let's get breakfast done.
Indeed.
Exclaimed Knuckles, returning the gesture. Tom retrieved a few oranges from the fridge and handed them to Knuckles, who immediately retreated to the kitchen table to squeeze the juice. Turning back to the fridge, Tom collected the eggs, butter, pesto, and cheese that he would need to make Maddie's breakfast. And he needed to act fast, too. She usually woke up around 15 minutes from now. Luckily, he was a master at making breakfast in a hurry. The man turned from the fridge to start his process at the stovetop, and nearly dropped his armful of ingredients. Knuckles was standing right behind him, where he had been standing just moments before, waiting on the fruit he needed.
Geez, Knucks, it scared me, but...
Tom said, readjusting his supplies after almost sending everything to the kitchen floor.
Do you need something else for the juice?
The echidna shook his head.
No, I have already finished this task.
He pointed at the kitchen island, where a pitcher of fresh orange juice sat.
Oh.
Tom uttered, that had barely taken a minute, but in Knuckles' defense, the man should have realized that juicing oranges would be a breeze for someone who could break your fingers with a handshake.
Okay, that's great. So how about you while I make break?
I would like your help to prepare this omelet.
Tom checked the clock, a bit nervous about the idea.
Sure, buddy, come on over here.
He led the boy to the stovetop, grabbing a skillet from the hanging rack.
So, start heating up this pan at about medium heat.
Knuckles nodded, watching the dots of blue flame erupt from the burner. Tom grabbed a whisk from the drawer to his left.
Can you get a bearing cup from the cabinet over there?
He pointed across the kitchen.
Yes, Donald or Tom.
He bounded across the kitchen, accidentally making loud footsteps that made Tom suck in a breath. Maddie would be awake soon. He had to make sure breakfast was still quick, even if he was teaching Knuckles. The echidna returned with the glass cup.
Here is the measuring instrument. May I assist in freeing the eggs from their shells?
Tom winced at the thought of their limited number of eggs left, but obliged and nodded him over. Knuckles leaned against the counter, ducking under Tom's elbow to get a better view. Tom held the measuring cup safely on the table, and gave Knuckles an egg.
Okay, so we're going to smack it on the rim of the cup.
Before he could finish his instruction, his face was splattered with the cold gooey egg, as was the rest of the counter. Knuckles peered down into the measuring cup, where some of the egg had still gotten in, along with some chips of the shells. He looked proud of himself, but the Echida's bright eyes fell slightly at the sight of Tom's egg-sprayed face.
Thought I caused more harm than good in my eagerness to help.
He hung his head and walked into the dining room. Sonic looked on after him, turning to Tom.
Did I say something wrong?
No, Sonic wanted to help. That's all. I just need to make sure we can get this done in time, though.
Sonic nodded and retrieved some paper towels to start cleaning up the eggy mess. Tom turned to the stovetop again. Okay, Maddie's still not up. There's still a few minutes to spare, so he has time to make a super quick omelette. He gets to work mixing up another pair of eggs, whisking in the pesto and making sure that the cheese goes in while the egg is still a bit runny. He still has a little basil left over from a few nights ago, so he adds a little garnish for extra style, and there it is, the perfect omelette, in just under 4 minutes. Maddie would love it. Tom walked past the dining room on his way to find Tails, and caught a glimpse of Knuckles at the table, his back to Tom. He was fidgeting with a few salt shakers. His head hung low. The boy flexed some egg out of his grills, sighing. Tom stared at his oldest boy, a sense of shame washing over him. He was only trying to help. He knew that Maddie deserved the perfect Mother's Day, but Tom had been so worried about the perfect part that he had pushed Knuckles' efforts aside. He turned to look back at the kitchen counter, and the two omelettes. One was brown and torn, eggshells poking out everywhere, and the other was absolutely perfect. He stared at them, then went off to find Tails and his breakfast tray. Maddie awoke to find her husband, dog, and 3 sons at the foot of her bed, holding a tray of food and beautiful flowers.
Happy Mother's Day.
They all said in a hushed voice to the drowsy woman, who sat up and smiled widely.
Rose, you shouldn't have.
She held her hand over her chest, beaming. Tails hopped onto the bed, careful not to tip the breakfast tray.
Don't be silly, Maddie. You're the best mom we could ask for. The least we can do bake you breakfast in bed.
The fox said, his tails wagging. Maddie was nearly moved to tears by her son's smiling face. She leaned forward and gave him a hug and kiss on the forehead.
Wow, wonderful!
Tails giggled, keeping the tray steady. Sonic leaped onto the bed in a blur.
I made the card. Look.
He pointed to a folded piece of construction paper on the tray. Maddie opened it, face lighting up at the colorful drawings inside.
Is that me?
She pointed at one of the marker figures.
Yeah, and there's Dad, there's Knuckles, Ozzy, and me.
Maddie giggled at the muscular blue hedgehog drawn with crude sunglasses.
Oh, this is so beautiful, Sonic. I love it.
She ruffled his wool, making him laugh. Knuckles approached the side of the bed and helped Tails position the breakfast tray over Maddie's lap.
I helped to prepare your breakfast, Mother Maddie.
Maddie looked down at the omelette in front of her. It was torn and patchy, and some of the cheese had spilled out in the pan and burned. Put his hand on Knuckles' shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. The Echidna had been so proud to arrange the little garnish on his cooking and serve it on the fancy tray. Ozzy was even more delighted he had gotten to catch Tom's delicious golden omelette as the man tossed it to him as a special treat. Maddie's eyes shifted from the omelette to Knuckles, whose beaming face told her exactly what she needed to know. She took a bite, smiling.
It's perfect.